Micro headline makes local life better. We provide one-stop services, including advertising design, website development, and event planning. Collaboration inquiries are welcome.
Hey everybody, this is Joel Butterly. I am the co-founder and CEO of InGenius Prep. And today we are talking about Trump's latest proclamation on H-1B visas and how that impacts students, and particularly how it impacts Canadian students. So let's dive right in. We have plenty to cover. So firstly, what is an H-1B visa? An H-1B visa is a work visa that is granted to individuals in what are called specialty occupations, which basically means they have trained or gotten a degree in a specific field like data analysis. Generally speaking, H-1Bs are the primary way that students who have studied in the United States but aren't from the United States are able to legally work in the U.S. H-1B visas last 3 years. They can be renewed for an additional 3 years and are considered an indispensable part of the labor economy. Just as an aside, H-1B visas are distinct from what it was called OPT or STEM OPT. That is a period of 12 to 36 months, 36 months if you have a STEM certified degree, during which you can work legally in the United States without a work visa. So that is a separate thing that is not touched upon by the Trump administration in their latest proclamation. So who actually uses H-1B visas? In general, it's about 70% Indian individuals. Their average age is approximately 34 years old. So they're normally, out of graduate school or significantly out of undergrad at that point. About 10% of individuals using H-1Bs are Chinese. The next largest is Canadian at 2 to 4%. Almost all of the H-1B visas are being used in the technology, consulting, or finance sectors, with companies like Amazon comprising roughly 12 to 14% of all H-1Bs granted, just Amazon. They do about 10,000 a year. In general, there's a cap of 85,000 new H-1Bs granted every year. That doesn't include transfers, it doesn't include renewals, just new H-1Bs. So there is a cap that has been implemented and was established in 2004. So a common question that I've been getting commonly is is Trump's rationale sound? That is to say, the rationale from the Trump administration has been that companies are using H-1B visas to hire lower paid foreign workers, thereby saving money and basically preventing American citizens from getting jobs. So is that true? The answer is absolutely not. So firstly, H-1B recipients earn on average over $100,000 a year compared to a median salary in the United States of $45,000. Legally speaking, H-1B employers have to pay the higher of either the actual wage that you pay other employees in the same role, whether they're American or not, or the prevailing wage for the same occupation in that geographic area. That is to say, if you have software engineers who are getting paid $225,000 a year, you cannot then hire a software engineer on an H-1B and pay them $150,000 a year. It does not work that way. That would be a pretty significant discriminatory action that would open those companies up to significant legal liability. So the bottom line is that presently, without this sort of $100,000 H-1B fee proposed by the Trump administration, the cost of hiring an H-1B worker is often higher. So just from my own personal perspective as somebody who runs a business that sponsors a lot of H-1B visas, just the cost of sponsoring usually, including legal costs, is around $10,000 in addition to the compensation for the individual. So it's actually more expensive for us to hire individuals on an H-1B than to hire American citizens or green card holders. But the reason that you would do it is because there aren't enough talented individuals that have, that are citizens or green card holders to fill these positions. It's not because you're trying to save money. So that argument is sort of nonsense. So a lot of people have been asking what this proclamation actually says, because there's been, over the weekend, there was a lot of back and forth in news media talking about, is this an annual fee? Is it a recurring fee? Does it apply to individuals who have H-1Bs but are currently abroad? Do they get charged $100,000 when they come back into the United States? So firstly, it's a one-time fee. It's a one-time fee of $100,000 to actually apply. That's new applications, meaning that if you've already submitted an application or if you already have an H-1B, this does not apply to you. This does not apply to individuals who are traveling. So if you have an H-1B and you're outside the United States, you're not going to get charged $100,000 when you come back into the United States. It does not apply for individuals who are transferring their H-1B visas. It's just for new applicants. So most important question that I've been hearing recently is this legal? The short answer, and this has been true of most of what Trump has done this year as it relates to sort of international students and foreign workers, is no. This is plainly illegal. And there's a number of reasons why, but essentially Congress has only given the president the authority to charge administration fees or processing fees, basically to cover the cost of adjudicating whether or not somebody should get a visa. That doesn't mean that the president has unilateral authority to slap a $100,000 tax on companies. That is obviously well in excess of the cost of actually, reading and determining if somebody should be granted a visa. Now, there's a lot of precedent, kind of related to this that's relevant. In 2020, Donald Trump tried to revise the H-1B system, essentially tried to put it on hold as a way of bolstering the American labor economy. And that was rapidly overturned by the courts, which found that the president has no authority to micromanage the labor market in this way. So it's highly likely that this, much like other things Trump has tried to do, such as stripping student visas, revoking SEVP certification for Harvard, proposing the ban of Chinese students in the United States, and cutting funding for universities. Much like all of those things, this will likely be subject to an injunction, which is a court order that will basically put a hold on this and make it unenforceable until there's actually a full ruling, and thereafter most likely will overturn this as well. So from a realistic standpoint, the expectation here is that this is not going to last and is not legally enforceable and is sort of obviously legally unenforceable. That's not really the point for the Trump administration, and nor has it been the point this year. As it relates to foreign students, it's mostly been about getting big headlines and shocking people, and whether the policy is actually implemented has mattered very little. So the actual reality on the ground for international students in this past year hasn't actually changed meaningfully. Just the perception of the U.S. and the sort of U.S. Immigration policies. So an obvious question then is, well, if this policy isn't helping American workers, right? Because it's not, these companies aren't using H-1B to pay less money to foreign workers than they would pay to Americans. If it's not helping American workers, if it obviously has a significant and detrimental impact on the economy by essentially stripping the tech sector of a huge amount of high value workers, particularly Indian employees. Why would Trump do this? The answer is most likely this is part of a geopolitical play related to India. So more recently, Trump has kind of entered into an economic spat with India, has levied tariffs on them to the tune of 50%. And just as he did with China earlier this year, he is trying to use Indian workers in the United States or Indian students in the United States as a bargaining chip. Now, something that he clearly does not understand is that targeting those individuals is not actually something that hurts India. It's something that hurts us because those are the highest talent, brightest minds that India has to offer, and they're coming to the United States to offer their talent to our economy. Making it impossible for them to get jobs here just means that they stay in India. That's a good thing for India. So we're not actually accomplishing an objective here of hurting India. Instead, we're just hurting ourselves and those individual people who are affected. Trump did the exact same thing earlier this year with China, threatening to ban Chinese students coming to the United States, which again doesn't hurt China. It hurts the United States. So he seems to have a misunderstanding about who benefits from those kinds of relationships. But he has a very simplified understanding of sort of the value of these individuals to the U.S. versus the value of those individuals to their native country. In any event, that's all to say that even though we would expect an injunction to happen relatively quickly and then for the courts to overturn this, even if that weren't the case, most likely the outcome of this is the same as it was with China, which is that they strike some kind of deal, related to the economy, and Trump basically backs off this policy as a result. Again, same thing that happened with China earlier this year. So that's sort of the bottom line. Is the headlines are bad, very unlikely to be to actually be enforced, and it will almost certainly be overturned. So turning to some other questions that have been asked. So why should Canadian families pay close attention to this U.S. immigration policy, even if their kids aren't yet applying for jobs? Part of it might be that in the very limited chance that this actually gets implemented, it will make it very, very hard to get an H-1B visa for obvious reasons. It would not make sense as an employer to pay a $100,000 fee upfront unless you're hiring somebody who earns $1 million a year. It's not going to make a lot of sense. What that means essentially is that individuals would probably be using O1 and L1 visas instead. The L1 visa in particular is basically an intra-company transfer. So, for example, if you're working for Google in their Toronto office, I'm not sure if they have a Toronto office, but let's assume that they do. If you're working for Google in their Toronto office and you work there for a year, you can use an L1 visa to transfer to the United States and work from the U.S. So one sort of reason is that your strategy might become to work for an American firm, but to work outside of the United States for a year before transferring in. L1 visas are actually less expensive than H-1B visas. They do not have a cap, so there's no $85,000 cap. And so I think that we'll probably see more use of L1 visas in general. The challenge of that is the L1 visas really benefits the larger multinational companies, right? So if you're a small tech startup, you can't really use L1 visas because you can't employ the individuals outside of the United States. So companies with international offices will get access to that talent pool, whereas smaller companies won't be able to compete. For Canadian students who dream of working in Silicon Valley or Wall Street, what should they be thinking about now? The bottom line is that I don't really expect any of this to be an issue in a couple of months. So I really don't think that I would change my approach at all. The reality is that most of the students, at least most of the students that we work with, are applying to U.S. colleges. Those aren't really the students who are then trying to get an H-1B visa. Usually, the students who are trying to get an H-1B visa, gone to a master's program or a PhD program. And so it's probably less significant for most of our families. But assuming that you do want to get an H-1B or you are going to graduate school in the United States, what I would say is basically your strategy is either, nothing has changed because I suspect that this will be overturned, or you do probably an L1 visa, most likely, possibly an O1 visa, which is, some for people with exceptional skills and very rare skill sets. Again, it's uncapped, but it's harder to get those visas. You have to demonstrate a lot of exceptional talent. That said, the approval rate for those visas are over 90%. So we'll probably see an increase there too. But what you would want to do is ultimately the reason you want to work in Silicon Valley or Wall Street is because those are the best jobs. They pay the highest rates. So what you'd want to do is find companies that have international offices where you can work for a year and are willing to sponsor you on an L1 visa on your way back. An L1 visa, as compared to an H-1B, costs about $5,000 less. So it's actually fairly efficient for companies, and honestly might be part of your strategy even if this policy is overturned. If this fee becomes a reality, what would be the immediate impact on Canadian graduates already in the United States? Again, same basic answer, which is to say you'd still probably want to work for an American company because those companies pay they pay the best, they have the most upward mobility, the most career opportunities. So you're probably not going to want to shift away from the American labor market. It might just be that you're working at an international office for a year or two before transferring to the United States. What advice would I give to Canadian families and students who are choosing between studying in the U.S. and staying in Canada? I would say that the decision calculus probably hasn't actually changed. It might seem like it has, but it hasn't. The reality is that the value of attending the U.S. universities, remains, among other things, that you have access to the American labor economy, more likely to be employed by an American firm, more likely to be able to work in the United States long term. Even to take one simple example, if you're interested in studying law, the starting salaries for lawyers coming out of top law schools in the United States is about 2 to 3 times the starting salaries of lawyers coming out of the top law schools from Canada. That's true even if you work in the Canadian offices of American law firms. So even there, you'd want to be working for these U.S. firms, and for that reason, the ROI, the return on investment, is still pretty much the same. Is this policy likely to withstand legal challenges, or is it more of a political scare tactic? It's definitely not likely to withstand legal challenges. It is almost certainly a political scare tactic. It's just that it's unclear who it's actually scaring. But since Trump has already tried this once this year with China, it seems that he just fundamentally misunderstands who he's punishing. He's punishing the individuals and he's punishing America. But he's not punishing, India. Just as when he cuts funding for cancer research from Harvard University, he's not really punishing Harvard. He's more punishing the researchers at Harvard and the entirety of American society. What kinds of careers or industries would be hardest hit if this fee goes through? Tech, finance, and consulting, almost certainly. Again, you can use O1 visas and L1 visas to get around this, but what you'd be talking about is, for example, Amazon, which sponsors about 10,000 H-1B visas a year, give or take. That's about 1 in 8 H-1B visas is going to Amazon. If they are obviously not going to be spending $1 billion or more a year in these fees. And so what they would most likely do is they would set up an entity abroad, possibly in Canada or elsewhere, to employ these individuals and then either bring them to the United States on an L1 visa or keep them abroad, which is to say that it basically just encourages tech companies to move overseas, which is obviously not something that's particularly good for the American economy, as that means fewer people earning wages, paying taxes, buying things in the United States, et cetera. Could this policy make U.S. universities less attractive compared to Canadian or UK schools? I think probably yes for graduate schools. I don't think it will actually have an impact on undergraduate. But if it became law, which again, I don't think it will, I can see where students who are studying abroad, for a graduate school would be more inclined towards a country where they have a greater likelihood of working. That said, if your goal is sort of like the best program and the highest possible compensation after graduation, the U.S. is still sort of unmatched. Even if you can't work in the United States, the fact that you can work for a U.S. company more easily makes it sort of unmatched. What contingency plans can international students put in place to protect their career options? I really don't think that you need to do anything right now. I would wait a couple of weeks. There'll be an injunction, then there'll be kind of a court case. Geopolitical landscape might shift and Trump might just back down. Any number of these things is likely. For the time being, what I would say is that I would just look into whatever career path you want. I would just make sure that there are American firms that you would really like to work for that have international operations that you can work for. If that's the case, then your backup plan is to just work in the international offices for a year and then get an L1 visa. Would this policy change the ROI, the return on investment, of paying for an expensive U.S. degree? I don't think so. Actually, as a matter of fact, your highest ROI is to get paid by an American firm, but to not live in the United States where things are very expensive, right? If you're working at the Manila office of like a top law firm or a bank, the amount of money you earn gives you much greater purchasing power there than it would in New York. So I don't think it necessarily affects the ROI. What it does change is the probability that you end up living in the United States. If the only reason that you want to live in the United States is so that you can work for an American firm, that's an easy problem to solve. If the reason that you want to live in the United States is that you genuinely love the United States and want to live there, then yes, it definitely changes the return on investments. Lastly, looking ahead 5 to 10 years, how do I see U.S. immigration and student employment policies evolving? I think on the whole, one of the things that this proclamation will reveal is how reliant our a tech sector and kind of high-end services and financial services sector, how reliant they are on foreign talent. And so I think that whether by economic necessity or not, the trend will likely be to continue allowing more individuals to get H-1Bs, more individuals to work inside the United States. It's just every fact supports that direction, right? It's better for the economy. There's a lot of evidence that firms that hire more H-1B workers grow faster and in turn hire more Americans. So it's better for the the naturalized American labor market as well. It's just obviously what is best for the country. And usually, politics aside, American policymaking sort of tends towards what is best for the economy and what is best for American society, even if temporarily it deviates. So I'm pretty optimistic in the long term, but in the short term, we have Trump, and so we'll see kind of what the next 3.5 years or so have to offer. That said, just as in Trump's first administration, it's almost always a lot of headlines and then nothing really changes on the ground. So I would expect that to continue to be the case. All right. Well, I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much for listening, and hope to speak to you all again soon.